This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your hosts, Radio Joe Hughes and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnik. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQ Radio Plus. It's episode 771. This week we honor the legacy of Lee Pemberton, cleaning and restoration pioneer. Hopefully join us very soon will be the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnik. We also have Pete Consigli, the restoration industry global watchdog on, and John Downey.
All right. Thanks, Joe. It's hard to really put in words how meaningful Lee was. If there was after the four founding fathers, the restoration industry, which was Marty King, Lloyd Weaver, Cliff Zlotnik, and Claude Blackburn. If we started to follow up with the next group of probably most significant people that I had to pluck out of a group, I'd probably say Lee Pemberton and Jeff Bishop would be those two guys, right? They both passed this year. As many of you know, we did a tribute to Mickey Lee. He's passed. And, Lee is more kind of associated with cleaning industry. Those were his original roots. He started as a dry cleaner and he got into carpet and upholstery cleaning segment. They really specialized in the upholstery, and the son, Jimmy Pemberton, they had some legendary courses, and Jimmy's still doing that to this day. But they did a lot of restoration stuff too, through Pemberton Supply. And the years I worked for Dry's, I went out there every year. We did the WRT classes, and they hosted all the different industry classes. So they had good background knowledge on that too. And John Downey was going to come on next. Wrote an article that I reviewed the other day, and Cliff also. He wanted us to look at some dates and accuracy and a few things, get a couple names right, and he's going to submit it to Jeff Cross, who will be publishing it in Clean Facts. And it really is a tribute to not just Lee, but all the founding pioneers of that generation that really helped build not the restoration industry as much as the carpet and upholstery cleaning industry, and the mon pa, the little guys, the restoration, a lot of the big restoration companies today and the networks, they started as little guys. Two guys in the garage, truck, working out of the house. And that's how it evolved. Even the fire restoration industry, those early roots came from the dry cleaning guys. And then they got into the contents cleaning and other things, So these industries have a lot of segmentation that kind of overlap. A lot of guys like me and Cliff, we always refer to it as the cleaning and restoration industry. But the cleaning stands for specialty cleaning, not the janitorial, the type of cleaning, the ISSA and the building service guys. It's kind of a different cleaning. It's a specialty cleaning. That's part of, every restoration project. We used to say, well, carpet cleaning, it's a line item on every restoration job, And so Lee was a very unique guy. I remember I first met Lee and a lot of the people of the Ed York era in the mid 70s, mid to late 70s. I used to call them the Fresno Mafia. That's where a lot of them started. It was Ed and Ron Tony, Tom Hill, Tony Lima, Steve Brandt, Bill Jensen. These were all the guys that were all part of Ed's inner circle. And there were other guys out there too. And then when I went to my first convention, it was a SCT convention in 1976 at the Wagon Wheel Resort in Rockford, Illinois. So get on Interstate 90 from Chicago, drive for a couple hours, there it is. And that's when I met Lee, I think, for the first time. I met Lou Migliori, big in the inspection industry, Bishop, and a bunch of other guys, all the usual suspects. Ron Tony was probably there. I remember Ed had this thing that he used to call, he had this huge, gigantic can opener. It was big like that. And he would engrave every year. He would give it to somebody who opened the most can of worms. I mean, he probably should have given it to himself every year, but he was the one who gave it. The Lou Migliore won it that year because and even to this day, he still creates a lot in that inspection sector. And I remember that I remember listening to them, and then a couple years later, I started doing business with Pemberton Supply and Steam Services, which was the West Coast counterpart with Steve Brandt and all of them. And Ed's company had a partner in that, and they provided all the little specialty stuff. A lot of the dry cleaning products too that the cleaners use, like the street spotters and the little bone share, all kinds of little oddball deals, that these guys needed to become real professional carpet and upholstery cleaners. And then, back in those days, the restoration, we didn't have, we had actual cash value. We didn't have total replacement costs. So there was a lot more emphasis on trying to save stuff, right? People didn't always have the money. And it was really a trade. It's kind of drifted from that now in recent years. It seemed to replace more stuff. But, but then there became the separation between the retail end of the business, which is cleaning business, carpet those, and then the insurance thing, which is third-party business. And it really put a lot of people at a lot of stress as they built their companies, because where were the crews? Did you mix them? Could you respond? Did you? But, a lot of that is ancient history now as the industry has kind of grown and evolved to where it is. And, so John, he's probably going to talk about some people that, so Lee was part of the original 4 kind of watchdogs that Ed York put in place that were the original individual shareholders. The 2 Paulson brothers, Daryl and Rodney, Lee, and Tom Hill. Tom Hill, he never really sat the seat very much. He had Cy Gant and other people sit it. And then eventually when he knew he was going to take over the management, he gave his stock back because of the conflict. And then, of course, I remember talking to Lee when I knew he was kind of moving into retirement. I mean, John Downey sat that seat for a while, but then when he started doing the serious stuff, he thought it was a conflict and he had too much. And Jimmy Pemberton sat it, his son, for a while. And I was at the meeting where Jimmy said he didn't want to do it anymore because he was busy, had a lot going on. And I said, well, who's going to do it, Jimmy? What's going to happen? He said, well, I don't know. Why don't you call Lee? So I remember calling Lee and talking to him. I said, Lee, what are you going to do? He said, well, Pete, there's this guy out in California named Mike Paliotto. Mikey. He has I saw that. He had the Mikey's board. And he said what it was at the time we used to call it an electronic bulletin board before the industry got, the world got so digitalized. I didn't really know him, but he said, well, he's a cleaner, and he lived, south of San Jose. All those years I was out there, I didn't really know who he was because I lived out in the Bay Area for several years. And he said, yeah, this guy Mikey, he's gonna be the rep. I said, why? He said, well, he was a specialty guy. He's a cleaning guy, but he says he looks after the mom and pop guys, and that's who Lee wanted to represent. And then I remember calling Downey. He said, Downey, you know this guy? He goes, yeah, he's a pretty good guy, and he's a real high quality guy, and it reminded me of some of the stuff. Reminded me of a guy like Dick Mapleson. So Dick Mapleson was legendary. They have awards for him, for Dick and Jackie Mapleson, in the CCI, CFI out there in California. And he was a small independent cleaner. I kind of think he's probably similar to Mikey P, John, And I remember when I first met him, when I went out there, these were the guys with Mike West, Carl Williams, Rod Bowen, Jim Miller, a whole slew of them that were all the California guys that built the industry in those days, and they were all known cleaners. And I remember meeting Dick, and Dick lived in, he was the most serious guy. He had that old Bates unit with the big bubble on it, the steam cleaning. I don't think he ever got truck mounts. And his clients were high-end clients all through Southern California, Beverly Hills, all these fancy people. And what happens is, he was a guy, and I don't know if Mikey's like this, because Mikey talked to himself as being a concierge cleaner, right? And Dick, we were at a meeting, and Dick says, he shows up the house, the lady said, can I pay? And he goes, madam, I'm here to clean your carpets. I'm not a bill collector. You'll get a bill. And I think somebody told me, and I don't know if this is legend, that he actually had an unlisted phone number that you had to get on his list to come clean your house was a real honor. And he was always booked out all the time. And he said, I wouldn't be cleaning your house if I didn't trust you. You're going to pay the bill. So I'm not worried about it. I don't have time to collect the money. He says, someone else, yeah, the office will do that. I guess it was his wife, Jackie. And, these are the old school stories, John, that you're talking about the founding generation. Guys like this, they don't exist anymore, but maybe they exist in Lee's spirit in a guy like Mikey P. And the whole group that he kind of does, and even in guys like you and your family that you grew up and how you operate, in an affluent community of Columbus and all the high end and there and Lee, I remember talking to Lee and Jimmy. Jimmy was September 17 when I first met him and started ordering, and you would have the people that would be like the mother and father start, then their kids, then their grandkids, the names of their pets, and you're the cleaner, and that's it. And those were the cleaners who started all in the early years of the National Rug Cleaners, which was the ASCR, which is now the RAA. There were those kinds of guys. They were in every city. They had the rug plants. They had the high-end location companies like Woodard's. There's a whole slew of them, right? And then a lot of them got into restoration too, obviously. And we forgot the cleaners. And John, I got to tell you, John, that article you wrote was really something. And it ties into, I did the DKI historical article on that, the IICRC, and then Michelle Blevins published it on the CNR page. What's the name of that page again? I drew a blank in this thing. But anyway, the historical page, but there's a name for it. And then the IICRC wants me to write the early history of the IICUC. And I said, well, once that's out, I want to tie in because I don't want to repeat the history. But after I read your article, I'm thinking, oh, John's a good facilitator because a lot of the stuff you put in there, it's all around the same time frame, from the mid to late 70s to the early mid 80s. This is where this whole movement was, because then by the end of the 80s, restoration came. Then in the 90s, restoration built. And then once we started with the ASD housing the mold, then it exploded and there was segmentation and all this. So John, look, you're a watchdog, and you fell off the York tree. And but I didn't realize how much of an historian you are, because all you needed were a couple dates. You didn't remember that Dan Savinoff was Bob Hughes' partner from Chemspec. I filled that in. Cliff can fill.
I knew it was a guy. I just couldn't remember.
Yeah. They were legendary.
I'm still missing somebody was certified.
Well, that was Bill. The certified guy with the shampoo with the big thing on the top.
Right.
The shampoo, whatever they call that. That was a $2,000 rotary with the little tank on top and it balanced it. Yeah, that was Dave Bergen, Burgin.
It was Dave. The guy that actually started it was Dave's father-in-law.
Okay, but Dave Bergen was the face for certified at the industry, all the industry events. And I didn't remember you having that in there because I would have commented on my little review that I did for you. But Cliff Note, remember, he'll pick all that stuff up. And basically, it's what a fabulous article it is. You really paid the tribute, and Lee is so well deserving. He kept going to work every day. I remember one of my visits out to Pittsburgh. One of the well-known companies there is G.S. Jones and Company, and with Scott, they've got out, and Dan. As a matter of fact, Dan, he was in the CR class in the late 80s with me and Cliff, and then he moved and did some bunch of consulting. And so me and Cliff go out there. We went out to visit them and go out to lunch with them one day when I was in Pittsburgh, right? And so the father, George, he was in his late 80s. He still shows up to work every day. He had Post-it pads. It was old school. And I said, Scott, your dad, what's he do? He goes, he just shows up to work. He puts around, he doesn't know where else to go. This is what he does, And Lee was that kind of guy. He just showed up to work every day, right? There's a lot of the guys like that because, when you stop working, most of the people I know, guys like Andy Ask and, my partners and Ken Gearing, they were all coming down for the winter break dinner. He was the founder of Thermistor. They're all in their 80s, mid to late, and they're retired, but they're not retired. And I'll tell you what, and there's actually some science on this and some stuff that's out there, which is easy to get. But when people retire or you get at that age, you have to figure out what to do. Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And you either got grandkids, you can do volunteer work for the greater good. You're a fisherman, you're a golfer, right? You do those, you give you time. But if you just think retirement, it ain't made up what it's made to be, because if you don't do anything, you basically die. You start to decay, you die, and that's it. And that's why you'll find some of these old timers, they just hang on because it's what we do. And we're going to continue to keep doing that till we can't do it anymore. And it gives us meaning. You know, Chuck Viola always says, what keeps up at night? I said, Chuck, I have a different question. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Because if you have no reason to get out of bed and go do something, whatever it is, go back to bed. And, Lee went to work. And that conversation I had with Lee, I remember it clearly. I'll tell you one other Lee story, John. Cliff's on. This was, I went out there every year. I always did the classes, drives. And Lee was that kind of guy. It resonated with me in your article, the way he was such an encourager and the way he was. And I was looked up to him. He was one of my mentors and one of the guys I respected. And he said, at one point, he took me aside after one of my classes. And, I guess what he was trying to say is that he was proud of me, of the trainer I'd become. And, I picked up the legacy from Claude and Cliff and others, and was out there trying to give good information. And a lot of the people that I trained back in those days, I'm not going to read their names, but they're legendary guys in the industry in their own right. They all came to my classes, WRT, all that kind of stuff. And of course, so many of them came to the unhouses. And he just told me that comfortably at the end, after everyone left, we're just sitting around talking. And I kind of said, Lee, how'd it go? Because I always ask the suppliers that anyway. I wasn't asking for his validation, but I guess in many ways he just kind of knew, and he gave it to me. And it surprised me. And it was an emotional moment. I had that kind of conversation with Ralph Boss one time when I go to Steamway, those kinds of guys, right? Do that 4-year era in the late 80s to early 90s when I was the kind of guy traveling and doing all that. And anyway, I guess that that was a very impactful conversation I had with Lee and some phone calls. And every year I went out there with him and Jimmy. We'd help train all the people that would come to the classes. And I did some additional stuff for some of their customers, adjuster training and, things of that nature that we did all around the country, through those years, the marketing classes and technical stuff. And Lee was always there as a stand-up guy. He was so supportive. He's one of a kind. They broke the mold with him. You captured it in the article, John. And he'll be missed. Nobody's ever going to fill his shoes. There's just some people, no one will fill his shoes. Nobody's going to fill Marty King's shoes. Nobody's going to fill these kinds of guys' shoes because that's just who they were. And anyway, I thought I was going to give a couple of comments and just get off, but it's not my nature. But I mean, it really, once you start talking about stuff like this, it just kind of comes at you. You can't help it. You can't make this stuff up. You either believe it and it comes to heart or it doesn't. And I don't have the time to do any of this stuff today. I got so much going on, as you guys know. But you know what? You make time for the things that are important. And I made time for this. And with that, I'll yield the floor back to the gentleman from Columbus, from Granville, Ohio, my friend, fellow watchdog, and apparently an industry historian.
And
Mr. Downey.
Buckeye lover.
Thank you, Pete. John, let's turn the floor over to you.
Well, in order that we have time for the actual program, I'll try and be, slightly more curtailed in my remarks than my friend Pete. I want to, and what I do in writing, and what Pete does, he does verbally. So long in writing, he's long verbally. So, but I appreciate everything you say, Pete, and agree with it. There really isn't a lot I need to add. I do want to emphasize something that you did emphasize, and to me, there were a couple things that were the core of Lee Pemberton. One, he did really have a passion for the little guy. They were what made this industry special to him. And he never lost that. He certainly had plenty of temptation to move in a different direction, but he didn't. And I think that's, you know what, rather than paint it in superlatives, it just is what he was. He was that. And the other thing is, Pete, you went off at the end of your comments about it at length, and I really can't improve on it. And although in the article and in my conversation, not just a conversation in Jim's, he didn't call it a eulogy, but in his comments about his dad at the funeral, the last thing, the last of 7 things that he taught his children was never retire, and he followed that, and he did more than just come into the office. He focused on things like communications with customers, newsletters, things like that. That not the things that the owner operator really isn't necessarily good at intuitively, most of them, although we tend to be really good with customer care, caring for our customers if we're gonna last. But it was that, and that was his focus in the business. But he also was one heck of a gardener, and there will be a photograph that comes with the article that shows some of his gardening prowess.
Hey, John, that Pemberton newsletter that he did that you were talking about that helped the small guys market to their customers, that was brilliant. I used to see that. That was really good. Yeah, so, John, I asked you that in there, if you can get a PDF reprint with the front of the issue or whatever the venue is, because those are the things that we can upload to our LinkedIn sites. We can help distribute. When RAA published the Mickey article, I can't believe how much I got a lot of play on that. A lot of people commented, but we got a lot of reactions up. So it really helped get around the industry over and above, just what CNR did. It's when you get the associations and the other groups that get behind these things, then you really get widespread, out to the greater industry at large. So that'll be good. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
If we can move to the next guy.
Let's go to the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnik, and then we're going to replay the really excellent interview we did. It's from 2010, but still stands up to this day. Cliff?
Yeah. And then Cliff, that's where before we did the blogs. So we did this with a lot of guys. And then he'll do the blog, which will memorialize it forever. And nobody's better than the Z-Man at that. All right, Cliffy, I'm glad you got on. I love you, brother. I'll see you shortly down here in the Sunshine State.
Maybe. Barring unforeseen circumstances.
Oh, don't go there. Don't go there.
Well, it's this, whatever. I'm going to shoot this one, my old computer in a minute, but that's a whole other. The bottom line is that it's unlikely that I'd be sitting here really without Lee Pemberton. I mean, he was my first specialty industry supplier. Before I met Lee, I'd go to a janitorial supply company and tell them I need some products to deodorize or clean or whatever, and none of the stuff worked, and they couldn't answer any information, and so on and so forth. And he was the first industry supplier that supplied stuff specifically, for the cleaning and restoration industry. He was also my first industry instructor. The first classes that I ever went to were classes that he taught. I mean, he was a successful businessman that I respected and that I looked up to. He showed me how to write a fire damage estimate. He showed me the importance of a cleaning evaluation test kit. He provided some subcontracting opportunities for me, during which he was always financially transparent and fair. He saw the unsmoked system firsthand, and it was his positive reaction and encouragement which gave me the confidence to try and market the system industry-wide. You know, we shared a belief in the importance of associations, and we were both among the founders of TRISCA, the Tri-State Restorers and Specialty Cleaners Association. So what I'd like to do is give you the rest of my feelings and impressions about Lee Pemberton by the letters of his name. L. L stands for learned, level-headed, logical, and long-sighted. E was for empathetic and enthusiastic. R is for reflective, reassuring, and resourceful. The O is for observative, open-minded, and outspoken. The Y stands for yeomanly and youthful. The P in Pemberton is for passionate, patient, and perseverant. The E is for earnest and endearing. The M is for motivating, methodical, maternal, and monumental. The B is for balanced and believable. The E is eloquent, exemplary, and exuberant. The R is resolute, responsible, and reliable. The T is talented, transformative, tolerant, and transcendent. The O is open-minded, originative, and oriented. And finally, the N was for nurturing and non-judgmental. Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. Thank you all. Pete,
All right.
we appreciate you joining us. John Downey, we appreciate it. I just want to say one thing before we go ahead and play the video and the edited interview we did. I think the thing that stood out to me most, and I didn't remember anyone mentioning this, but Lee was a mentor for a lot of people. And I think that was the big thing. He wanted to always try and help other people and mentor other people. And I think many people have mentioned that, I think as a kind of a tribute to him, if all of our audience could just mentor one more person and help them through whatever it may be, whether they're in the cleaning and restoration or indoor air quality or whatever it may be in life, mentor someone, help them through, and that would be a good way to honor Lee. So let's go to the show now. Grayson?
All right, today's guest is Mr. Lee Pemberton. He's a nationally recognized consultant, speaker, and pioneer on business, technical, and marketing topics that concern the cleaning and restoration industries. Mr. Pemberton has been involved in professional certification, as few others can be involved. He is a founding shareholder, past president, and member of the board of directors for the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification. In addition, Lee, along with his son Jim, own and operate one of the industry's oldest specialized cleaning supply stores, serving the needs of cleaning professionals across the country. Their Cleaning and Restoration Learning Center is the educational and training division of the Pembertons. It was founded to serve the business, technical, and professional development needs of cleaning and restoration companies and their employees. We are delighted to welcome a familiar face at many industry trade events and an industry pioneer, Lee Pemberton. I think we have some intro music.
Okay, that's our pioneer music, Lee.
Welcome, Lee. Do we have you on the line?
You do.
Great.
And
Hi, Joe, and hi, Cliff.
Hey, Lee, it's good to have you here. We're really excited about the interview. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Well, let's go back in history. What year did you enter the dry cleaning industry?
Well, I'm going to have to give you a little bit of a story here. It'll give you a little background on most things about me. It was the late 50s. I was a very young family man. Found myself working in a steel mill here in western PA. And then during the constant layoffs at that time, And during the layoff periods, I would supplement my unemployment with various sales jobs in the city. And one day, I happened upon an opportunity to intern as a spotting specialist in a local one-hour dry cleaning plant, so I took it. In my efforts to learn these skills, I found it not only interesting, but quite challenging and a much more comprehensive job than I'd expected. And while developing these skills, I became involved in a process of learning all about fabrics, finishes, many types of construction, but not only in a finished garment, as I expected, but in window coverings, wall decor, and even fine upholstery coverings. So the opportunity of learning the science of cleaning as I learned the spotting skills has opened many doors for me in later occurring events, and which, of course, this industry was in its absolute infancy in those days. And what I didn't realize was that the skills I developed during that period would serve me well even till this day. For instance, I had to learn small business management skills in that on-the-job environment, and I had the fortune to have a patient and solid guidance. I also quickly learned that there was no such position as a skilled spotting specialist. It turned out that skilled spotting specialist was a fancy name for the guy that had all the responsibilities of running the business, and when I say all, I mean all. That included cleaning the restrooms. Well, the owner first went away for 2 weeks, and he left me in charge after about 3 or 4 months. Oh, I was honored. I felt that, wow, I was going to be okay. Then I found out I had to make all the repairs, inspect all the finished work, handle employee problems. And mind you, all the employees except me were women, and I was that kid to them. And I also had to wait on the counter when more than one customer came in. Wow, was that an education for me? Well, when he came back, he said, you did pretty good. Well, now there's a few more things you'll need to know before I go to Florida for the winter next month. Well, long story short, by 1961, I was running the operation, and he blessed me with another smaller plant on the other side of town and a coin-operated laundry to operate while he went to Florida and ran his big dry cleaning operation there. But my baptism of fire continued. Now, as I continue this brief story, keep in mind, I was very unsophisticated. I was hardworking with a wife and 3 kids at this point in my life. My economic savvy, my knowledge of regional and national trends, as well as any investment skills, at that time in my life would be very highly suspect in today's world. So, moving along, and by 1963, unfortunately, I had proudly become the owner of that small dry cleaning business. And that's a decision I later came to regret on some levels deeply. I soon learned that while managers do work long hours, as I had learned, owners never quit working. And I soon learned the value of knowing all the jobs in a small service business. Turns out when one of the pressers didn't show up because of too much partying after payday, I was the backup presser, so my lead presser, called a silk finisher, would feel like we were a team, and she wasn't stuck with all the work. And then when the seamstress didn't show up, you can guess who had to learn to make repairs and do simple hem jobs in a big hurry. And I thought that was tough. I had no clue what tough really was until I learned that a new mall was being constructed just outside of town. And then, in the space of only 2 years after I bought that business, Sears and Penny's were gone. Now, these were each located within 2 blocks on either side of my store, and I experienced a drastic drop in customers, both the employees of these stores and the ones that patronized them. Well, and by 1967, downtown McKeesport was already undergoing massive redevelopment. Pretty obvious that didn't just happen that quick. That was underway when I blindly made my purchase. But, since I had no trusted resource to consult, I found myself with a Main Street retail rent that I couldn't pay, as well as a banknote for the business I purchased that I couldn't pay. Well, my options were to declare bankruptcy or find new sources of revenue. Well, I was too stubborn or stupid to pursue bankruptcy, because that was a real negative in the 50s and in the 60s. So I began to look into income-producing potentials that I might have been overlooking. And I'd already become pretty proficient at drapery cleaning along with pickup and delivery, so I added and actively solicited a take-down and rehang service to see if anything would happen, and boy, did it. I found that there was an expanded market existed on the part of pickup and delivery. I had already developed my local Jewish business clientele who really wanted someone they could trust to come into their homes and provide these additional services. So I was thrilled, but then I found out from my clientele they wanted more services that I wasn't ready to provide. Turned out they needed help with wall washing and heavy cleaning of kitchens and bathrooms, very much especially before the spring Passover season. That was a keen want on their side. Well, that didn't require much of an investment on money, but a lot of physical, obviously. But I immediately added it, watched it grow rapidly, and almost too rapidly. Plus, I now found they also wanted me to oversee the cleaning of the carpets and the upholstery. I couldn't do it. They wanted somebody they would trust, while the old rug scrubbers came in to really mess up the place. Then, of course, I had to make it look good before they got back home. Well, and of course, another life-changing decision for me was to soon come about. That sets the scene for when I got started, Cliff.
Okay. You know, when you decided to enter the on-location cleaning business, were you an independent or were you a franchisee?
Well, I've already spoken candidly about my management skills that let me stray in the purchase. So let's put it this way. I started as an independent. I screwed up. I bought a franchise. I learned an enormous amount. Then I wound up becoming an independent again. So there's a little bit of an interesting story that goes with that. And the on-location drapery cleaning came in as I came back to, as I started while I was a Service Master franchisee. But I was aware of Service Master, DuraClean, Von Schroeder as resources when I was looking for some way to add these additional services. But I tell you, they weren't cheap. And I had nowhere to turn for guidance. The dry cleaning industry couldn't give me any help. I asked my suppliers, as we do these days, and they didn't know a thing. So believe it or not, I did a really brilliant thing. I made an investment in a carpet cleaning kit advertised in Popular Mechanics magazine. How's that?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Well, it gave me a guidebook, told me how to modify a twin brush home carpet scrubber into a dry foam carpet cleaner that I could use in my little carpet cleaning business. So I thought, well, maybe I could get started. Then I can do better. Well, I did it. And I got pretty good results when I did my first dozen or so jobs. Then catastrophe. I cleaned a plush silver acrylic carpet that was trash, to say the least. Well, what did I know? It had black walkways. It was black in front of every register. Well, big shot that I was. I felt I knew how to goose up the cleaning power of that mild shampoo. I just added trisodium phosphate to the shampoo, and I scrubbed it into the black area using a scrub brush on the handles that I dipped in a bucket and scrubbed it over. Well, the black disappeared like magic. Well, when I got done, the carpet was wetter than usual, but it looked really great. The customer was ecstatic until the next day. My phone started ringing as soon as I opened the doors of my dry cleaning shop at 7 a.m. in the morning. Well, long story short, you've never seen such a magnificent case of Browning in your life. And I had absolutely no idea what to do. Well, in desperation, I called our Pittsburgh area's top in-plant area rug operator, who at the time was the current president of the National Association of Rug Cleaners, the NIRC, I believe it was called. So I asked him if I disengaged that carpet and brought it in, would he correct it for me? And he said, in essence, pay for it, blank, 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 and consider it a lesson to stay in your own business instead of trying to take ours. Well, I bought it, and I handled the claim quickly and made the customer happy because she was a dry cleaning customer. And I kept the rug to remind me of my stupidity. Well, I then bit the bullet, and I purchased the Service Master franchise from a carriage trade dry cleaner here in Pittsburgh, who also, fortunately, took me under his wing since we were both dry cleaners. It happened to be Oswald Werner and Sons Club. Mm-hmm. And one of the first things I learned was how to completely correct the severe browning of the silver acrylic rug. That single process burned into my brain the need for training and knowledge, and the need for a trusted resource to call when you need help. That arrogant NIRC giant changed my life. I learned a great deal from the franchise, but I finally determined later that the return I got for the fee after I got all the knowledge didn't work for me anymore. So I became an independent and have been very independent until this day.
During these, early days and even up until today, I'm just curious, what people in the industry made the biggest impressions on you, and why?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a question that might have been difficult for me to answer a little earlier in my career, but it's crystal clear to me now. There are 4 men top the list of peers who had an enormous influence on me. Now, as I list them 1 to 4, that isn't necessarily an accurate sequence as far as their importance in my life, but each one touched me in a way that made a permanent impact and at different times. I'd need an hour just to discuss these men and how they affected me in my life path, so I'm just going to go just rather quickly over it. They all have special traits in common. 2 of them, Jim Roden and Cliff Zlotnik, are blessed with brilliant minds that they were able to use for more than the innovative chemistry skills they had. They shared that knowledge with me, and they helped me to simplify it so I could share it through training. Jim Roden saw me as a skilled communicator, and I had to live up to his expectations, so I had to really work at it. And besides, he was the first one to pay me for doing training, so that helped me work hard. Now, Cliff opened my eyes to incredible concepts of deodorization beyond my imagination. And I met him as a very young man who was quite brash, and he spoke of his goal, and to say the least, he's over-delivered as far as that goes. Now, I would have never succeeded in distribution without the gentle guidance of Ken Hines, and he's the founder of Sunbelt USA, a long-time distribution business in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I didn't even realize what he was doing for me until many years later. I'll mention that maybe later in our discussion. Finally, Ed York, a man everyone loved to hate. He was the man who dreamed of concepts that ticked everyone off. But Ed was always very considerate of me, taught me and the big thing he taught me was the financial value of combining training and distribution, which, as you know, is now the accepted norm in this industry. And by the way, Ed was also the developer of the concept of the IICRC, along with countless other still functioning concepts today. So that's about it.
What prompted you to get involved with regional trade associations, and what really were the issues that regional trade associations were concerned about when you first got involved?
If you go back to my conversation just previously, it was my own experiences that when I needed help and needed knowledge, I couldn't find it. That was a driving force. That has stayed with me from the time that I was, around 30 or so, until today. It's never quit burning. The reality that cleaning professionals had nowhere to turn was devastating as far as I was concerned. And at that time, even when I talked to a cleaning professional, everyone mistrusted everyone else. They were afraid because of the lack of knowledge of their industry and because of the lack of knowledge of their competitors. They wouldn't even talk to them. And there were no distributors that we could pick up a phone and call for help. So that is what drove me. I just felt that we had to do something. And so at that time, trade associations became the resource to talk to one another and to bring in training or develop training.
From there, you kind of started talking about that leading you to being one of the earliest distributors in the industry, I guess. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you came about going into the distribution business?
Well, that is an interesting story, and sometimes I have to think about what are the things that made me do it. But I'll tell you what, it really comes down to several factors. Number one, there weren't any distributors available anywhere within several states of here. They were just basically sales reps for the new truck mount technology. And most manufacturers in those days simply were forced to sell direct. Well, that's where Jim Roden really had a major influence, because, of course, as the founder of ProChem at that time, he was on the road with his new truck mount technology, and he would show up to show it. And then because I liked the things that he told me and he shared with me, I would buy enough materials so I wouldn't have to pay the shipping from Arizona. Well, he finally convinced me that he should leave. In fact, he wanted to ship, and he did ship large quantities, that I had room in an extra warehouse so that I could supply the companies that were coming in for training, and I was showing them how to use these products, and then they could buy them. So I wasn't officially a distributor at that time, but I was sure selling a lot of ProChem products, and that then grew by customer demand. And in those days, I was seen all throughout the East as professional chemicals. So as it began to grow, there again, this is where Ken Hines comes into the picture, because he was the fellow that taught me very early something that was incredibly important. I went down to Raleigh to ask him about some advice on purchasing a software business management program he had. And the advice he gave me in his gentle southern drawl was, Lee, if you want to succeed as a supplier to this new industry, you've got to start selling multiple lines. You can't just sell ProChem. Well, that was a tough one, because all the manufacturers wanted exclusivity, but he said, Lee, they want it. He said, but that's not your problem. The customers want choices, and if they won't give it to you, go to someone else. Well, I thought that over, and I made one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. I decided I was going to give my customers what they wanted and try to sell them what I had in stock. And when I told Jim Roden that was the most powerful, loudest silence I've ever heard in my life. And it took him a weekend to think that over, because he couldn't speak. But he called me back. This is a measure of Jim Roden. He called me back and he said, you know what? You are right. He said, I just hope that you make some choices I can live with. Well, I guess I did, because we went on and his company grew and mine grew. But I told him, I said, I got to train my customers. I have to recommend what I think is best, but I really have to help them get what they want. And they wanted choices. And it turned out teaching and distribution were perfect partners for this industry, and I was well prepared to provide both.
Lee, let me back up just a minute. I want to make sure I got this right. Now, you were already teaching. Were you teaching for yourself, or were you teaching for somebody else? I'm just curious.
What I was doing, I had become so impassioned that in the very early days, once we got our association going, then other associations would ask if I could just come and talk to them. Well, I've always been able to structure things together. So I would ask them what they wanted me to talk about and explain. And so I began to put together things. And I put together outlines with what a good carpet cleaner should do. And I learned early, since I went up into the New Jersey and New York area where they eat people that like me, I learned that you have to have your ducks in a row. And you better speak like you know what you're talking about, because in those days the steam guy sat on one side of the room and the rug scrubbers on the other side, and there was definite strong animosity between them.
I'm curious. I know that You mentioned steam and the rug scrubbers. For those of us that aren't as familiar with the industry, can you tell us a little bit more about why there was that animosity between them and where we are today with respect to those two, I guess, techniques?
Sure. In the early part of this industry, carpets were cleaned. Well, up until about 1965, most carpets in the home were loose carpets. Then the popcorn nylon after the Second World War became more and more affordable, and they just made it so it could go on everything. Well, it couldn't be taken. You're not going to pull it loose and take it in plant, though the in plant guys wanted that. So we developed on-location cleaning. Well, existing technology was shampoo. ServiceMaster fought it like crazy. When I bought my franchise, I had didn't even have a brush on the machine. I had a mop disc, which they use for maintenance today. And then I had little samples to show people how steam destroyed the carpet. Well, I wasn't stupid. They took a steam gun and blew that half a carpet apart. Well, and that was not a lie, they said, but it certainly was fraudulent messages to the consumer. But that's the passion there was then. The fellows that were shampooing carpets, now you had the door clean at that time. They cleaned by hand with sponges and light brushes on their hands and knees. Von Schroeder had their dry foam, and they still do today. And they did, because they also had extraction with it, they did a reasonable job, just slow. ServiceMaster was the one that didn't want to switch, and eventually everybody had to switch. And so that's why the steam guys, that was like a new religion. And you had all these new people coming in to the industry, and the on-location scrubbers who were party and parcel of the rug cleaning plants hated it. That was where technology and the old guard were clashing. And this went on for probably almost a decade, but at least very, very viciously I remember the early 70s in Columbus when we saw this going on. So, but over in Jersey, New York, they still have to clean with scrubbers in those giant buildings today.
One thing that I remember too was this definition of the word steam, and you weren't allowed to use it in the yellow page. I mean, the people that were on the opposite side didn't want hot water extraction or steam cleaners to be able to use the word. They said it was fraudulent advertising, and there was there were issues over whether you were allowed to use it in the yellow pages or not. And I was probably Bill Bain, I think, maybe, that kind of came up with a definition that I think that the industry has probably lived by ever since. Would you agree, Lee?
I would think so, yes. And he remains quite a unique guy. He was a fellow that managed to never have a distributor, right, because he had such an efficient training system for his method of cleaning, which it's looked down on by many today. But he proved quite clearly that good cleaning is done by knowledgeable and dedicated men and technicians and owners, rather than by highly powered equipment. You can take a highly powered piece of equipment with a person lacking in knowledge, and you won't do near as good a job as one of these other fellows.
Okay. Well, we're right up at halftime here. We'll get to, we've got a text question for you after halftime, Lee, but if you can hold on for us for a moment, we're going to thank our sponsors. Our association sponsors are the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry at iicrc.org. The Environmental Information Association, EIA's multidisciplinary membership, collects, generates, and disseminates information concerning environmental and occupational health hazards in the built environment at eia-usa.org. The IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry, IICRC.org. The Restoration Industry Association,
the oldest and largest nonprofit professional trade association dedicated to providing leadership and promoting best practices through advocacy, standards, and professional qualifications for the restoration industry at restorationindustry.org. Industry sponsors are Particles Plus, feature-rich particle counters and air quality instrumentation. Count on us, particlesplus.com. Tramex Meters, innovation in moisture detection and humidity monitoring systems since 1974 at tramexmeters.com. EMSL Analytical Inc., providing high-quality, full-service laboratory services since 1981. EMSL.com.
Lee, how did you get involved in fire restoration?
Well, that goes back to the days when I had the dry cleaning plant. That put me right into fire restoration. Early on, the insurance adjusters would stop in the shop and they'd ask me about cleaning and deodorizing of clothing. And I said, sure. And they'd ask me to go out and pick it up. And then they always asked me to do these special things. And I said, all right. And I brought it in. Well, then I got on the phone to find out how to do it. That was the one thing in the dry cleaning industry, which was quite mature then. I could call the IFI and found out who in different states did that kind of work. And they told me. And I got better and better with each job. Well, then, I don't know if you're really an adjuster, you do one thing good, then they want you to do something else. So they asked if I could look at some smoke-damaged furnishings. And in that case, it was lampshades, draperies, and upholstery, and I did. And then I got on the phone again, and I called other dry cleaners for guidance. Happened that time that on the upholstery, I talked to Oswald Werner and Son, and I was able to complete the job satisfactorily. Well, the adjusters found out I was washing walls and as a service to my clients, and that did it. Then they begged and pleaded for me to take complete small jobs, and I did. And I did them satisfactorily. Then State Farm hooked me up with a contractor out of Greensburg, which is about 20 miles or so from McPheesport, who desperately needed my help, and we clicked. So I found a new and a profitable diversification then that probably couldn't work today. But there was little competition in our area in the middle to late 60s and then on through the early 70s. So it worked, and I did quite well, thank you.
Cool, thank you.
Lee, over the years, what were some of your biggest business mistakes that you made? I know we don't like to, announce these things, but we've got a lot of listeners that are maybe just getting started or, partway through their careers, and we always like to learn from the pioneers' mistakes.
Well, I'll tell you, I was fortunate and made my biggest mistakes early. And I discussed briefly about my poor judgment that I used in purchasing the dry cleaning business. Now, mind you, I certainly don't regret all that's happened since then that's molded who and what I am. I have to say I have a lot to be thankful for. But in my direct, honest evaluation, you have to say I was lucky too. I'm going to say to our listeners, never count on luck in business, and don't buy a pig in a poke like I did. You have to look into so many things. Even if a price sounds really sweet, the things that may happen in the early future can devastate you and cost you far more than your investment. On the other hand, I can honestly say that I don't know that I'd want to go back and change anything that's happened in my business career, and I do believe my best days are still ahead of me.
Lee,
that's about it.
Well, thanks. We know that you work with your son Jim intimately within the business. What tips can you give listeners about bringing a son or daughter into their business?
Well, I tell you what. To me, it's fairly simple. As long as the parent understands, you have to start them early. You have to build their interest in everything you do, and you have to treat them. I say you have to treat them really well. Teach them the value of work. You have to teach them that a job well done is payment beyond a cash equivalent. In today's society, that will be difficult to do, but it can be done, and it's very important. You want to also, as a parent, treat them fairly. Don't treat them preferentially, but don't baby them either. And I learned this, above all, pay them fairly. Not more than you'd pay anyone else, but not less. Be honest with them. Small business isn't easy, but it has incredible rewards. In this world we live in today, people that have gone through college and spent a fortune in education are just getting out of the corporate rat race, and they want to go into small businesses for themselves. And they don't care about working extra hours or long hours because they care about the intangible rewards more than the money. And finally, I would say, just remember, they're not little adults. They're children, and they'll probably not have your stamina, and they will forget. So have patience. But I sure think it's a gift that a small business person today can bring to their children, not just trying to make sure they can make a whole lot of money, because money won't buy success or happiness in their lives.
You know, Lee, that kind of, it ties in a little bit to a text question I have here from a listener, and maybe you can answer this for us. You've seen many changes over your decades in the industry. Have you seen a lot of changes in the consumers out there?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
What kind of tips would you give people today for dealing with, the modern consumer here to help them? Is it still the same basic principles that you've always used, or do you have to change things a little bit?
Probably they're much the ones that I have used, but they're not the ones that have been prevalent in our industry. Somewhere along the line, in our industry, we made cleaning a commodity, or at least carpet cleaning a commodity. And so we began to market price. Then we forgot about the consumer. We thought that's all they wanted was price. Well, if they have nothing else to measure it on, that's all they know to ask for. But, you can never cut the price low enough to make up for the type of things that go on if you don't have enough money to have the right employees, the right management, and all the right skills that are necessary. Today, they're faced with things that they weren't. We were faced back in the old days, I'll call it. Whenever I started selling on-location carpet cleaning, it was unheard of because people just didn't do that. So it was educational. And then people didn't trust you then. They wondered, they're going to let you in their house? Well, they did after you worked with them. I learned that I had to become a part of my community. I had to work with the church groups. I worked with the garden groups. I worked with upholsterers, and I worked with every kind of a service that was established to get their reliance on me so that they could recommend me, or I could say, call them and see, and you could ask. Well, we're back there again. That's where we are today. Trust just doesn't exist. It's been devastated since 2008. And I know that a lot of bad habits have fallen into our industry, and we're going to have to get rid of them. We're going to have to treat the customers like our mother. We're going to have to dress appropriately. We can't go in with dirty cutoffs and clean carpet just because it's hot. We can dress appropriately for the heat, but we can't dress in ways that are offensive to our seniors. While people value their long hair and their body art and their facial jewelry, that frightens the seniors. So we have to think about our customers. We have to put them foremost. And I always say the easiest thing is, what would your grandma say? And if she'd be happy, well, of course, some grandmas are happy with the murderers, so maybe that's not a good one.
No, actually, I think that's great advice. And you kind of led me into another question that we wanted to talk to you about. A lot of current people, current consumers are more technologically savvy, and I'm curious, are you a techie, or have you always been a techie?
Well, I thought about that question when you mentioned you might ask that. Here's what I have to say about that. I've always tried to adopt and share technology that makes service company operations easier and better. Now, what I found was that a computer allowed me to be as big as the big guys. And most of our customer base is 1 to 10 employee cleaning service companies. That's a different type of business than the bigger restoration companies, and they have to run differently. But these 1 to 10 employee cleaning companies, they need to come to grips with the fact that they are not a cleaning company first. They're a marketing company first, who delivers wanted services. And you see, technology drives good marketing. Computers do that. Cell phones are now becoming the mobile computers. And soon, the more discerning of our cleaning services will find out they can't be answering those cell phones on the job. And they'll move to specialized technology such as the Perceptionist Inc., where the phone gets answered properly, and so it doesn't upset your valuable clients while you're in their home. And speaking of technology, Joe, the Internet today provides higher quality and lower cost advertising and communication methods than we ever had. And that really benefits the little cleaning service companies that use it. Talking about truck mount technology, do you realize we have men that are still cleaning carpet at a much higher age bracket than we could have ever imagined 25 years ago? We have a class going on at our building right now, and one of the fellows that takes a portable into the house and cleans is in his 70s attending this class. Mm-hmm. And finally, chemical technology just never ceases to amaze and attract me. So that's how I'm a techie, Joe.
Okay, great. Cliff?
Lee, when you look in the crystal ball, what do you see in the future for the cleaning and restoration industry?
Well, first of all, I love this industry. I see this industry as becoming better and stronger, but I see a more mature industry. I see it divided into high-tech specialties. In other words, the mold remediators, the indoor air quality specialists, such as we've had so far, like Glenn and the fellows like that. But we'll also have color repair specialists. We'll have carpet repair and reinstallation specialists they're like these are specialists, and they'll accept referrals from the general practitioner cleaners. Then on the other hand, the general practitioner cleaners will be the professional carpet and hard floor cleaners that can provide excellent service in this general practitioner area. They'll be competent then to refer his valuable customer to a reliable local specialist that he knows and can vouch for. And that's working in the legal and medical industry today. Our industry is moving there. They just haven't gotten there, but it has to happen, and it'll work.
In your many years that you've been teaching, you've been doing the work, you've been, closely involved in the association world. I'm curious, what trends have you seen that, kind of have run full cycle, and where are we headed with respect to those trends?
Well, I've seen a number of trends run, but the one that I'd like to just share with you right now is the most powerful one that we have to pay attention to. And that's the trend I called education and trust. During the 60s, the consumer didn't trust letting just anyone in their homes. And they wouldn't take just anyone's word for touching their valuables. And so we had to become an expert to earn their ear. And I found that having a storefront helped, and being a dry cleaner was a plus. There's no two ways about it. And I found that recommendations from a home furnishings dealer was very strong. And I've developed an expert tag by offering to go into the different furniture stores and putting on training sessions for their salespeople for no cost. Just did it as a service, and we found that there was a whole lot of trust elements that I had to develop. Well, that all disappeared as our society became a throwaway, wasteful society with easy money to spend. It was easy just to go in and clean furniture because they'd only clean it once and throw it away. But now, since 2008, we're back to maybe even a tougher era than I had in the 60s of distrust and suspicion. So that's the big one, Joe.
That's great. Yeah, that is some great advice for our listeners, Lee. We're going to go to what we call a roundup. We'll bring Dr. Wow on to comment or ask a question, and then we'll go around one more time and ask questions, and we'll let you go. And we appreciate you hanging in there with us. We'll be right back. Hello, Dr. Dietrich. Wow, do we have you on the line?
Yeah, hi there. Good day, whatever it may be.
Good afternoon, or wherever you're calling from. Dieter, speaking of techies that are, got a few gray hairs, you do pretty well yourself there. I have to give you credit. You keep up with modern technology, and I think it's been something that has helped you at least somewhat in your career. Could you comment on that?
Oh, certainly. I haven't thrown in the towel yet. I have a little bit of a cough, which I caught yesterday after I cut the grass and I had a beer and it was getting cold outside. And I felt tickling. Anyway, yes, absolutely. I mean, I did well. I kind of keep up. I can't keep up with everything, of course, but I found out that running your own business is. It sounds a hell of a lot better than it is, as we had learned already. But another thing that I know, and I don't even think you, Joe, know that, when Lee mentioned that he had to learn how to sew on buttons and do some sewing and stuff like that, and I surprise everybody, male and female, when I do sewing. I have a sewing machine. I'm a Class A machinist from Germany, and in my hometown was a company. They made sewing machines. And I went over there to make some money, and I learned how to repair sewing machines. And these were industrial sewing machines. So once you repair them, you have to try them out. You have to know what you are doing, like all of that stuff.
Wow.
And after I learned all of that, I did sew a lot. A sail shop, they made sails for sailboats. And I mean, you talk about huge pieces of cloth. I was very, very good at that. And somebody comes over here and said, I need to hem this and I have to do this. I said, look, just give it to me. I said, how do you know how to do that? But I did that 50 years ago. I learned that one in a hurry. Yeah. Anyway, I have, I know nothing. I mean, not know nothing. I know what sodium chloride is. And I need to use that one on the ceiling of my kitchen before I paint it. But I think there were a bunch of valuable comments being made on how to survive in this world. And it's not easy. It is not easy. And even if I said, I start my own business, and as Lee mentioned, when you're a good employee, you work 9 to 5. When you're the owner, you work, 7 to 7 or something like that. But, overall, I liked very much what I was hearing. I can't, I don't know anything about the cleaning solutions and whether dry foam or wet foam and extraction. I know nothing about that. I know I need somebody to clean my carpet or replace the thing. So, but I think we learned quite a few things on what can happen to you when you start your business, and you got to be astute. You got to keep your eyes open, front and back, and see what is happening. Find a niche, and there you go.
Yeah, and I think you've also, by example, shown that not only, just like Lee was talking about, you do a lot of educational programs. You go out and you teach, and that kind of feeds into your consulting business as well. So I think the two
absolutely.
of you have,
every time I get a job, and I see that I kind of was the first one to do some air sampling for whatever. Well, I have to talk to the employees. I tell them, I said, look, I'm here not to screw you, not to, I'm here. I was hired to check at this and this and this and this, and that's what I'm doing. And the guy who pays me, he will give you the results, and you can take a look at it. So there is an educational thing or an educational factor, every job that I have. And of course, I teach with you. This is only 2 weeks? No, it's 3 weeks from now, I guess. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Summer camp's coming
up in Indian Lake. I'm looking forward to come out there again and enjoy the fresh air in the mountains of Pennsylvania. And I will be there for almost a week or something like this,
yes, sir.
Which is wonderful. And I love teaching. And I love to work with students, particularly the good ones who listen, and do what I tell them to do. That is sometimes difficult, but absolutely. This is the other thing. Every time I teach, I learn something.
Exactly.
That is I'm not teaching everybody something, and I always learn something. Hey, sir, excuse me, I'm doing this and this and this. Have you? I said, no, I've never heard of that. Tell us. Oh, I said, that's interesting. So it is not really, it is give and take, and that is one of the reasons why I love it, to do that. And even after the class, said, hey, can we sit down and we talk a little bit after class? I said, sure, that's what I'm here for. And, again, I'm learning while I'm teaching, and I think that is great, and that's why I'm doing it.
Well, Dieter, thanks as always for joining us. We appreciate it. And let me get one more question in here from a listener for Lee. And Lee, before I do, anything you wanted to add to what Dr. Wow just said here?
No, I think he really summed it up beautifully.
Thank you. I do too. He's an interesting gentleman. Anybody wants to see us, give us a call. We'll be up in Indian Lake in 3 weeks. But I've got a text question I think this really should be to you and Cliff. Have you or anyone in our industry been approached by groups like the CDC or NIOSH, the National Institute for Occupational Safety or Health, or the National Institutes for Health for epidemiological study of trade exposure to asbestos or mold or lead or anything like that?
Cliff, you'll have to take that one.
I don't know. Not that I'm aware of. I've certainly not been contacted by any of those agencies.
No, and I know that you have gone after disasters and into areas to look at the restoration process, but I think that's an area that needs more study, obviously, and it's a great question from the listener. Thank you, and you have a great weekend, too. And we want to finish up with a very important question that Cliff has for our guest today.
Well, actually, I've got a couple of comments. I think, first of all, Lee's answer to the question on giving tips to listeners about bringing a son or daughter into the business, I think was among the most profound segments that we have ever had in 175 shows.
I wish you would have told me that 10 years ago, Lee. Maybe 15.
I think.
Well, thank you.
Excellent advice there. And what's interesting is Lee's was the first trainer that I encountered, and I thank you for many positive changes and inspiration that you've given to me and made my life. We thank you for joining us today. What I'd like to ask you is something I don't know if you ever thought about it, but industry-wise, what would you like to be remembered for?
Well, I don't think it's too complex. My whole lifelong focus has been on sharing valuable, needed information to the small business. I call them the 1 to 10 employee business because that's the little guys who so badly need affordable and useful information. And I just like to be known as someone that has made it easier and better for them. That's why I've worked so hard with the IICRC, and that's why now I see coming down the road, not too far away, something that I've wanted for many years, and that is distance learning being made available right at our grassroots level. And I want to see that happen while I'm still able to really be a part of it, and I know it's going to happen.
Agreed. Absolutely. It's like a steamroller coming at us, Lee, and
You bet.
we do really appreciate. Thanks again for joining us. We want to thank our special guest this week, Lee Pemberton. We will hope to have you back again sometime. And
Lee, is there anything that you would like to add? Any questions that we didn't ask?
No, not really. I just want to thank you for the privilege of being able to talk from my heart today, because, as you know, that's when I can really express how I feel. And you've extended that, and I really hope that some of the listeners have found some valuable tips in this information. And if they would like to contact me, they can certainly pick up my email address, or they can go online to pembertons.com and check me out.
Great. Well, thanks again for joining us, Lee. We really appreciate having you here on IAQ Radio. And before we go, I want to make sure I also thank my co-host, the Z-Man.
It's been fun. This
is a lot of fun today. Environmental Annie Koalecki, thanks for your help at the controls there. Also want to thank Glenn Fellman for helping us with the IE Connections What's News segment. Of course, Dr. Dietrich Wow, as always, for joining us and helping us up with the roundup. Last but not least, we want to thank our growing group of loyal listeners. Thanks all of you for hanging in there. We went a little over today, but we appreciate it. Hope it was worth your time. We'll see you next Friday for the next broadcast of IAQ Radio.
For IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reel saying thanks for listening.